I'm Stephen Thorpe, and welcome to my exhibition, Enter the Forest at the Darkest Point at Ora-Ora Gallery. The title of the exhibition draws on a quote by Joseph Campbell, which is, "Enter the forest at the darkest point where there is no path," which describes the hero's journey, which is essentially a story of self-discovery. This is the key conceptual motif throughout all the works I've produced for the show, Ora-Ora, and I draw inspiration from 15th century medieval Flemish tapestries, and the work is peppered with cross-cultural symbolic iconographies such as birds and spirit animals. Okay, the first painting I'm going to talk about is this one here. Now, this is called Enter the Forest at the Darkest Point, which lends its name to the title of the show, and it kind of embodies all the aspects that are in the work. So up here in this sort of wall motif, we have this decorative trees and birds and flora and fauna, and down in this lower part of the painting we have this forestscape that's peppered with animals, some real, some imagined, some mythical. I guess the other thing to note, and you'll see that in all of the works, is that it's presented, the composition is that of a corner, so there's 1, 2, 3 planes, and you'll see that in all of the work. The other thing that's prevalent in all the other work is the forest motif, obviously, which it lends its name to. So in this image, there's lots of animals. It's hard to know exactly what's happening, if they're interacting, if they're talking to each other, if they're running away from each other. But symbolically, they're cross-culturally significant, and it's kind of a universal language. Things like birds, deer, swans, even the forest itself, it's loaded imagery. So when you put that in a painting, it's going to speak to you in a way that's pertinent to you, your culture, your background, your life experience. So this body, this work embodies the exhibition, and these the way this flora and fauna comes in is all encompassing. And I guess carrying on from that idea of the immersive experience, you can see here this wall graphic that I created, which is placed on this entire wall at the end of the gallery space, and then all the other walls are painted with this very deep, rich, viridian green-like colour. The back wall's the exception, that's red, but that's so it complements the greens that are already in the paintings. So green is definitely a theme as it relates to the forest. The other thing you'll notice in all of the works is the palette. So we looked at the green over here, and this is purple, and there's some reds and blues as well, and they're very deep, rich, unctuous colours. And I kind of had a Renaissance palette in my mind when I was thinking about how I was going to present these wall areas, and I chose it because it's old, and the forest and the idea and the concept and the lessons embedded in this sort of philosophy of entering the forest and rediscovering yourself related to this idea that the colour is old and rich too. So they complement each other, they speak to each other. So in this work you can see these very thickly applied impasto application of paint that actually traverses the side of the canvas and spills over, so it brings a sculptural three-dimensional quality to the work. The other thing that's noticeable here is this incident magmatic mark that cuts across the picture plane here. Now, the point of this is it's a degree of it's a sort of incident mark that breaks up the form. It's a point of interest, and I always like these little disruptions, these interventions, these imperfections in this very smooth gradated surface, and this interplay between I guess polarity is a theme within the work. So this interplay between order and chaos, light and dark, internal, external. Are we in a space? Is the space our mind? Is it a landscape? Is it a real landscape, or is it a picture of a landscape? So here we can see, and we'll notice in all the works when I talk about them, is the viewer's position in the forest. So we have, you're either fully immersed in it, or it feels like you're on the outside about to enter the forest. So there's this kind of anticipation as you go in. The title of this painting is Sometimes a Tree Can Teach You More Than a Book. And that lends itself to the idea that not everything is academic, not everything can be articulated through spoken words, and that sometimes the greatest lessons we can learn are from the natural world itself, and that we should go out into that forest physically and metaphorically and try and learn more about the world and ourselves. That leads me into this painting, which is called A Deep Whispering, which harkens to that voice that we all have in our heads that perhaps is telling us we're doing the wrong thing, or when we know we should be doing something else, or if we're not living our fullest potential or realizing who we really are. With that in mind, I created this really deep, rich surface on the top where there's no gradation, so it's really flat. And I found that was sort of an appropriate way of relating to the title of A Deep Whispering. It's almost like this void where you can hear the echo of that voice resonating around the internal structure of your mind. And then that leads nicely down into this quite soft depiction of the forest. And this image is slightly different from the one we looked at before, in as much as it feels like we're fully immersed in this one. It sort of frames this landscape that we look onto, which has a castle in the background, which is quite a fantastical image, and I guess it represents something like the ideal. So here we're fully immersed, and we have the castle landscape in the distance, and there's this sort of voyeuristic interplay between us and the other. Moving on, I'll talk about this painting here, which is called Natural Life is the Nourishing Soil of the Soul. And that's a really nice title and relates to the previous work I spoke about, which is called Sometimes a Tree Can Tell You More Than a Book. The idea being that the natural environment has lots of knowledge and wisdom to share with us that you won't find in any book. Now, notably in this painting is the first viscous layer of cobalt blue turquoise, which permeates the surface. This creates this really deep, rich, unctuous, tactile, three-dimensional sculpted surface. So this part of the painting kind of pulls us back into the real world. It has a physicality that really speaks to us. And then as we move down, we enter the sort of fantastical narrative of the rug. Now again, we have the forest, of course, and the notable difference here also is that we have these two figures that are just in the frame, so they don't dominate the image. And then we have this deer that seems to be running off down this thoroughfare into the forest. And whenever you see figures in a painting, it's very easy to project yourself into them. So perhaps we're the hunters, perhaps we're the ones being hunted. Or maybe the idea is that we have to go into the forest and we're actually hunting ourselves, or a different version of ourselves. This too has a border of flora and fauna, which acts as a nice mediator between these two languages. And that interplay again between the languages of paint is something I'm very interested in from a technical standpoint. So this thick three-dimensional sculptural impasto work and this very meticulous dry brush work, and those two sit at odds with each other, and I'm always trying to reimagine these different paint handlings in a way that's cohesive, in the same way that I am with the ideas and concepts and symbols and iconography in the work. It's like, how can I bring all these things together in a way that's reimagined but cohesive at the same time and doesn't feel like a hodgepodge of imagery. So following on is this painting called The Ancestral Realm, which relates to the forest. Our ancestors would have inhabited the forest and they would have hunted in the forest. It was their supermarket, it was their drugstore, it was everything they needed was provided to them by the forest. So in that regard, I mean, the forest is already sort of, it's a very special place ingrained in our psyches, although we don't inhabit the forest in the same way anymore. It's a part of our cultural heritage and background. This painting too has this thick impasto paint, and the alizarin crimson bursting through gives it this real pop of color, and that's why it's used very sparsely so it doesn't dominate. And again on top we have this unctuous cobalt blue turquoise surface, which is the reverse of this painting. moving down, we can see that the paint is so thickly applied, it's actually encroaching onto the canvas. So this tight line that's normally the division is broken, and we have this sort of magmatic flow coming into the work. And that's that interplay again of, are we inside? Is this the inside of our minds? Interiority, exteriority. Am I in the forest? Is it the metaphor of the forest? Is this some unconscious ancestral memory? So again, tying the concepts in with these evocative titles of the works. In this image, it's 2/3 of the image is the actual rug design, and with the viewpoint of as the viewer, our perspective is slightly elevated, and it feels like we're about to enter the forest, and there's this river moving just in the bottom corner down here, and the rivers are the lifeblood of the forest. So I think that's a nice metaphor for maybe that this is the lifeblood of our journey of self-discovery, is that we have to start in these places and venture forth. Lastly, I'm going to talk about this work here, which is called The Light Needs the Shadow. And this is a significant painting which kind of has a sister painting over here, and these are presented together, which ironically, if you imagine them coming together, would form another corner here. But the regular format of that closed corner composition is broken here. Although there still is a corner, you just can't see the second plane. So it's essentially still a corner painting, but it's different. The other notable difference, of course, is that we have this light source streaming through from an unseen source. So there's a real ambiguity and mystery to this painting. Should we go towards the light? Should we stay away from the light? Should we remain in the shadows, or should we explore and extend beyond the safety? And again, this drama is played out in the forest motif below. The color used here is Viridian Green Deep. Now, green is associated, there's always cultural nuance and difference, but sort of in a semi-universal way, green is associated with magic, mystery, and the unknown. So there's a lot of green in all of the works, and it's why the gallery space was created green. So there's this immersive experience of the unknown, which is what the idea and concept behind the show is. You explore the forest, you enter the forest at the darkest point, and you're on a journey of self-discovery, and you take this path that no one has trodden before. It's yours to explore, and that is the unknown, and that is the conceptual motif behind all of the work and the show itself.